I thought I was just going for a regular checkup, but what started as a routine visit turned into something that changed my life forever. My name isn't important, but my story is. Because sometimes, the people who are meant to heal us, end up breaking us instead. I never imagined I'd end up here, telling the internet about the one secret I swore I'd take to my grave. But maybe that's the only way to breathe again. My name doesn't matter. What matters is how easily trust can blur into something else, something dangerous. Dr. Michael Adler had been my private doctor for almost 6 years. He'd seen me through pregnancies, anxiety attacks, and the quiet exhaustion that no one else noticed, not even my husband, Ethan. Michael wasn't just a doctor to me anymore. He was someone who looked me in the eyes when he asked, "How are you really feeling?" The first time I realized our connection wasn't normal was during a routine checkup last winter. I'd been feeling off, dizzy, lightheaded, emotionally all over the place. He sat across from me, his tone gentle but direct. "You've been pushing yourself too hard again, haven't you?" I laughed, brushing it off. But the truth was, I had been. Between work, kids, and trying to keep Ethan's world in order, I'd forgotten how to breathe. And somehow, sitting there with Dr. Adler, I felt seen. Not as a patient, not as a mother, just as me. He didn't rush appointments like other doctors. He'd sit, listen, ask about my favorite music, even remember my birthday. I told myself he was just being kind. After all, doctors are supposed to care. But when his compliments started slipping into conversations, "You've got this glow today," or, "That color looks beautiful on you," I felt my stomach twist with something that wasn't discomfort. At home, Ethan barely noticed when I changed my hair or wore new clothes. He'd glance up from his phone and mumble, "You look nice," before going back to work emails. But when Dr. Adler said it, I believed him. His voice carried warmth, his eyes lingered, and for reasons I still can't explain, I didn't want him to stop. Weeks passed. I found excuses to schedule follow-ups, a recurring headache, a stress check-in, anything. He'd smile knowingly but never called me out on it. There was an unspoken understanding growing between us, something fragile and forbidden. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. The sky outside his office was heavy with rain. I remember sitting on the exam table, clutching the edge of the paper gown, feeling the cool air brush against my skin. He came in quietly, wearing that same calm expression that always made me feel safe. "Your test results are fine," he said. "But you still seem tense." He was right. My body had been one long knot for months. "It's nothing," I whispered. "Just stress." "May I?" he asked, motioning to my shoulder. That's when I felt it, the first touch that wasn't clinical. His hand rested lightly, reassuringly, but lingered a second too long. The room fell silent except for the rain tapping against the window. My breath caught in my throat. Every part of me screamed that it was wrong, that I should step back, say something, leave. But another voice, one that had been lonely for far too long, told me to stay still. He finally stepped away, clearing his throat. "You're carrying too much," he said softly. "Sometimes, it's okay to let someone help you." I nodded, unable to speak. My heart pounded in my chest, confused and terrified. Because I knew then that the boundary between us had shifted, and neither of us had the courage to move it back. When I left the clinic, the rain had stopped, but I couldn't feel the air. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself that nothing had happened. That it was all in my head. But deep down, I knew better. That night, Ethan kissed me goodnight, and I pretended to be asleep. My body was there beside him, but my mind was still trapped in that small, sterile room where trust had turned into something else. Something I wasn't ready to name. And that was only the beginning. I told myself it was just another checkup. That's what I kept repeating as I stared at the reminder message from Dr. Adler's clinic flashing on my phone screen that Monday morning. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just another checkup. It was a meeting I should have canceled the second I saw his name. For 3 days before the appointment, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed that moment, his hand on my shoulder, the way his voice softened when he said, "You're carrying too much." It wasn't the touch itself that haunted me, it was what it meant. Because that tiny moment had split my life into two worlds, one where I was still Ethan's wife, mother of two, a woman holding everything together, and another where I was something else entirely. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror, curling my hair even though I didn't need to. I told myself I just wanted to look put together. But when I reached for my perfume, The one I used to save for date nights. I froze. My reflection stared back at me, and I barely recognized the woman in the glass. Still, I went. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. The receptionist smiled, told me to take a seat, and my heart pounded in my chest like I was waiting for something I couldn't admit. When Dr. Adler finally opened the door and called my name, his eyes met mine for half a second longer than they should have. It was enough. Inside his office, the air felt thick. He smiled politely, pretending everything was normal. "How have you been feeling?" he asked, flipping through my chart. I shrugged. "Tired. Overworked, maybe." He nodded slowly. "I figured as much. You look tense again." That word, again, landed heavier than it should have. For a moment, there was silence. Then he set the clipboard down and leaned back in his chair. "Can I be honest?" he said quietly. "You don't have to answer if you're uncomfortable." I felt my pulse quicken. "Sure." He hesitated, then said, "I think you're carrying more than just physical stress. You seem lonely." The word hit me like a cold wind. I wanted to deny it, to insist that I was fine. But my throat tightened, because he wasn't wrong. I looked away, trying to gather myself. Everyone feels that way sometimes. He studied me for a moment, then sighed. "Sometimes, people come here looking for help they can't describe. It's not always about medicine." That was the moment everything changed again. His voice was low, almost kind, but his words sank into the cracks of my marriage, my exhaustion, my need to feel seen. I don't remember exactly what I said next, only that I laughed it off. Something about midlife drama. He smiled, but the look in his eyes said he didn't believe me. Before I left, he stopped me at the door. "You know," he said, "you don't always have to be strong. You can talk to someone. Even me." That line replayed in my head all day, even me. Driving home, I kept telling myself he was just being supportive, that I was reading too much into it. But by the time I parked in front of my house, my hands were trembling. Not from fear, from something I couldn't name. That night, Ethan worked late again. I sat alone at the dinner table, staring at my untouched food, wondering why my heart felt like it was in two places at once. I picked up my phone twice, thinking of texting Drive Adler something casual, something harmless. But I stopped myself. Instead, I just scrolled through our old appointment reminders, reading his polite messages, searching for meaning that probably wasn't there. Days passed. Life went on. School runs, grocery shopping, laundry. But beneath it all, there was a quiet current pulling me toward something I couldn't resist. And then, one evening, out of nowhere, I got a message from the clinic. "Greater than, we're following up on your last visit. Dr. Adler wanted to check in. How have you been feeling lately?" I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I knew the right thing to do was to ignore it. To delete it, pretend it never came. But I didn't. I typed back, "I've been okay. Just tired, like always." Seconds later, the three little dots appeared. Then his reply, "Greater than, you're always welcome to come by if you need to talk." That was the moment I realized, this wasn't just about medicine anymore. It was about something far more complicated. And I was standing right at the edge of it. They say every affair starts long before the first touch, in glances, in words, in moments that seem harmless until they're not. I used to think that was just something people said to excuse bad decisions. Now I know it's true. After that last appointment, Drive Adler and I began exchanging messages, nothing inappropriate, at least not at first. He'd check in occasionally, asking if I was sleeping better, or if my headaches had stopped. I told myself it was part of his job. But his tone was different. Softer. Personal. It didn't feel like a doctor checking on a patient. It felt like a man trying to understand a woman who'd forgotten what it meant to be noticed. Our messages grew longer, late-night conversations that drifted from health to life, to stress, to dreams. I told him things I hadn't told anyone, about how Ethan and I barely spoke anymore, how I sometimes felt invisible in my own home. He didn't judge, he just listened, and in return, he started opening up too. He told me about his own marriage, how the long hours and emotional weight of his job had created distance between him and his wife. "It's strange," he wrote once, "how we can spend our lives helping others but still fail to save ourselves." That message stayed with me for days. One Friday evening, he texted me again. "Greater than, you seem quiet today. Rough week." I typed back, "Just one of those days." Then he replied, "If you ever need a moment away from it all, you know where to find me." My heart stopped. I read that line over and over. Was it an invitation, a comfort, or something in between? I didn't respond, but that weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I replayed our conversations in my mind, remembering his voice, his eyes, the calm way he said my name. By Monday, I gave in to what I told myself was curiosity. I booked another appointment. I didn't need one, but I went anyway. When I walked into his office, he looked up, surprised but not shocked. I wasn't expecting you this soon, he said. I had some concerns, I replied quickly, my voice trembling just enough for him to notice. He nodded, gesturing for me to sit. The air between us was different, heavier, charged with something unspoken. He asked the usual questions, took notes, but the small talk felt forced. Finally, he put his pen down and said quietly, "You didn't come here because of your health, did you?" I froze. What do you mean? He leaned forward slightly, his tone still gentle. You could have called, but you came in person. I just want to understand why. My throat went dry. For a second, I thought about lying. But what came out instead was the truth I'd been avoiding. Because, I feel like myself when I talk to you, I whispered. He didn't respond right away. The silence stretched between us, thick with meaning. Then he sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You have no idea how dangerous that is for both of us. I know, I said. But it's the only thing that feels real lately. He looked up at me then, and I saw the conflict in his eyes, the same one I felt every time his name appeared on my phone. When I left that day, he didn't walk me to the door like he used to. He stayed at his desk, hands folded, eyes distant. But before I could step out, he said softly, "Take care of yourself, okay? Please don't come back unless you really need to." I nodded, my chest tight. Because we both knew what he meant. If you keep coming back, we'll both fall. For a few weeks, I stayed away. I buried myself in house chores, family dinners, work deadlines, anything to drown out the thoughts that kept me awake at night. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt. Every time Ethan mentioned, "Your doctor," something in me twisted. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That I could stop anytime I wanted. Until one evening, I got another message, not from the clinic, but from him directly. Greater than, "You left your prescription file at the office. You can pick it up tomorrow if you'd like." But I hadn't left anything behind. He knew it, and so did I. Still, the next day, I found myself standing outside his office again, pretending to check my phone, pretending not to care. When I walked in, his assistant said, "Oh, drive. Adler's just finishing up. You can wait in his office." The door clicked shut behind me, and I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. His jacket was hanging on the chair, his pen still resting on the table. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, familiar, grounding, dangerous. When he finally entered, our eyes met, and for a long moment, neither of us said a word. That was when I realized, we had already crossed the line. Not with touch, not with words, but with silence. With everything we both pretended not to see. And from that point on, pretending would no longer be enough. I told myself I wouldn't go back. After that last meeting, I swore I was done with whatever this was, the messages, the tension, the looks that said more than either of us dared to speak. But when people say emotions make bad decisions look reasonable, they're right. It started with a rough week. Ethan had been traveling for work again, missing dinners, forgetting calls. The kids were restless. I was running on coffee and half sleep. That Friday morning, I woke up dizzy, my chest tight from stress. My instinct was to push through, like always. But something inside me whispered his name before I even realized it. By noon, I found myself dialing the clinic. "It's nothing serious," I told the receptionist, "just a follow-up." When I walked into the waiting room, everything felt too familiar, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the quiet shuffle of papers behind the counter, the faint smell of disinfectant that somehow reminded me of calm. He was standing by the window when I entered his office. He turned, surprise flickering across his face, then concern. "You look pale," he said. "Are you okay?" I wanted to say yes, but my voice betrayed me. I just needed a moment. He gestured to the chair, and I sat, my hands twisting in my lap. "You shouldn't be here if you're not feeling well," he said. "I know," I whispered. But I didn't know where else to go. That was the truth, the part one hadn't been willing to admit, even to myself. It wasn't about medicine anymore. It was about the one place where I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain started again, tapping softly against the window, filling the silence between us. Then he said quietly, "You know this isn't right." I looked up. "I know. Then why do you keep coming back?" "Because you listen," I said, my voice shaking. "Because you make me feel like I still exist." He sighed and looked away, running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't need me for that." "I don't want to," I replied. "But I do." For a moment, everything hung there, heavy, fragile, impossible. The air between us was thick with all the words we hadn't said. Finally, he took a step back and said softly, "You need to take care of yourself, but not here. Not like this. Talk to your husband, find a way to reach him." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it hurt. "You think I haven't tried? I think you've given up," he said. That stung. Maybe because it was true. He went to his desk and picked up a small card. "There's a counselor I trust," he said, handing it to me. "You don't need medication. You need someone who can help you figure out what you want." I stared at the card, blinking back tears. What if what I want can't be fixed? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, quietly but firmly, "Then you have to stop running from it. Whatever this is between us, it can't continue." I nodded, unable to speak. The rest of the appointment passed in silence. He printed a note for a mild stress prescription, though we both knew it wasn't about medicine. When I stood to leave, he walked me to the door. "Take care, all right," he said softly. I managed a weak smile. "You too." The drive home felt endless. The world outside the windshield blurred into streaks of gray. I wasn't crying, I was just empty, like someone had quietly taken the air out of my lungs. That night, I told Ethan I was fine when he asked. I even smiled as he talked about his day. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just about Dr. Adler anymore. It was about what his kindness had revealed, how starved I was for connection, how easy it was to mistake empathy for love when you've been lonely too long. I didn't see him for weeks after that. But I carried his words with me, heavy and haunting. "You have to stop running from it." He was right. I'd been running, from my marriage, from my emptiness, from the reflection in the mirror that no longer looked like the woman I used to be. And I had no idea that trying to stop would lead to something I couldn't take back. Sometimes the loudest regrets are the ones we never speak. For weeks after that last visit with Dr. Adler, I tried to rebuild the quiet life I'd almost destroyed. I went through the motions, cooking, working, pretending, all while replaying his words in my head like a warning I couldn't escape. Ethan and I began to talk again, at least on the surface. He noticed I seemed distant but didn't press. Maybe he was afraid of what he'd hear if he asked. Or maybe he, too, was just tired of pretending everything was fine. There were moments when I almost convinced myself it had all been a dream, the messages, the appointments, the looks that lingered too long. But reality has a cruel way of reminding you that some lines, once crossed, don't disappear. One afternoon, I stopped by the clinic to drop off paperwork for our insurance. It was supposed to be a quick errand. But as soon as I stepped through the doors, my heart tightened. The smell of disinfectant, the faint echo of heels against the tile, everything felt too familiar. I didn't expect to see him, but fate has a strange sense of timing. He was walking down the hallway, looking tired but calm. When our eyes met, he paused for just a second before giving me a small, polite nod, the kind doctors give to any patient. It was professional, careful, distant. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. For a moment I thought he might stop, say something, acknowledge what had passed between us. But he didn't. He simply said, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hale," as if I were anyone else. That was the moment I knew it was really over. Whatever fragile, dangerous connection we'd built had dissolved into silence. I got back into my car and sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the rear-view mirror. I didn't look like the same woman who had walked into his office months ago. I looked older. Wiser, maybe sadder, too. That night, I finally told Ethan something, not everything, but enough. We sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet except for the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. "I haven't been happy," I admitted. "For a long time. I've felt invisible." He looked startled at first, then guilty. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know how," I said softly. "I thought if I kept going, it would get better." He reached across the table and took my hand, the first genuine touch between us in months. "I can't fix what I don't know is broken," he said. We didn't fix everything that night. Some cracks take years to close, and some never do. But we began to speak again, really speak, about what had been missing, what we had ignored. As for Dr. Adler, I never went back. I deleted his number, his messages, everything. But sometimes, when I'm driving past the part of town where his clinic stands, I still feel that familiar tug, not of longing but of memory. I think about how easily loneliness can disguise itself as love, how being seen by the wrong person at the right moment can change everything. And I think about the quiet cost of secrets, the ones that never get told, but live forever in the pauses between words. Now, months later, I've learned that healing doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from forgiving yourself, mostly. If I could speak to the woman I was back then, sitting nervously in that white room, searching for comfort in someone else's kindness, I'd tell her this. You don't need to be rescued. You just need to be honest, especially with yourself. I still wear my wedding ring. Ethan and I are trying, slowly, awkwardly, but honestly. He'll never know everything, and maybe that's for the best. Some truths only exist to remind us of the lines we should never cross again. But every now and then, late at night when the house is quiet, I catch myself remembering the rain against that clinic window, and the way his voice softened when he said, "You're carrying too much." And I realize, he was right. I was. But I'm not anymore. Because I finally learned to carry only what's mine to hold. This story is a dramatized true confession shared for educational and emotional reflection purposes. It does not promote or glorify infidelity or immoral behavior. Viewer discretion is advised. This story deals with mature emotional themes. If this story touched something deep inside you, take a moment to subscribe. There's more to every secret, more to every heart, and sometimes, the only way to heal is to listen. Speech balloon, leave your thoughts in the comments, your story might be next. Heart subscribe for more real-life stories that reveal the hidden corners of love, loss, and betrayal.